Hi. It's wonderful to see you all here, and I'm really excited because our storytellers are eager to share their stories with you. I created this show modeled after the Moth because I believe in the power of stories. It's the first entertainment that we ever had. It has the power to help us understand ourselves, help us understand one another. It builds compassion, it builds community. And this place is really about community. I do want to warn you that there's some colorful stories and some colorful language. So I hope nobody will be too shocked by that. And I'd like to introduce our first storyteller tonight, Colin Hanlon, Navy man. New York City firefighter.
Yeah.
And I and quite a few people here know him as friend, neighbor, family man with a beautiful wife, who's also here, and 3 great kids. Colin?
I'm going to the fucking brig. The brig is what the Navy calls jail. I was in the Navy for 4 years, and that's exactly where I thought I was going. You see, it was 11:55 at night, and I needed to be back on ship by midnight. Well, the ship was right there, but my wallet with my identification was in a taxi going that way. So we had a pretty great day. My buddies and I went out, had a blast, even though it was Dubai. Now, it's not 2019 Dubai, this was the spring of 2000. Wasn't really a billionaire's playground at this time. There's a couple tall buildings, a Western-style shopping mall, and even a Hard Rock Cafe. That was fun. There was nothing else there. We had been here plenty of times. We'd done some of the historical stuff, but now it was time to have a good time. So we'd been out drinking all day, and we found plenty of beer to drink, even in the desert. And that's probably why my buddies found it so funny as I screamed as the taxi drove away, and they went back on board ship. Now, we hadn't been in port for almost 2 months, so we should have been, but some scumbag kept threatening to bomb the ship. So we had stayed out to sea longer. And our captain and our bosses were very specific when they told us, do not lose your IDs, do not get them stolen, so they could not be used against us to harm us. Lucky for me, there was a line of cabs dropping other sailors off, so I hopped in the very next one, and I told the cabbie, you know what I told him, right? Follow that car! He didn't understand a word I said. So we chased his taxi for about a mile, and I finally convinced that taxi to pull over, to my relief. I walk up to him, pretty happy I'm not going to jail. Look in the car, it's the wrong cab. It's the wrong fucking cab. Holy shit, I'm in trouble. I'm in a lot of trouble. I don't know what I'm gonna do. Now I'm nervous. It was funny before, but now I'm scared. So I get back in the cab, and my cabbie, that's what I like to call him, my cabbie, because he was in it for the long haul now with me. He was a nice guy, an immigrant from India that had moved to the United Arab Emirates to earn some more money for his family. So we start driving around Dubai, looking for this cab, like I'm going to recognize the driver, or one of the thousands of red and white cabs that drive around this nation. So it wasn't too promising. So we cruise around for a little while. My nerves are really taking a toll on me now, and time's ticking on. It's way after midnight, and it hits me. The port of entry. When we had to get back to the port, we had to go through a booth, and I had to log in. I had to sign a log with my social security number, and the cabbie had to sign next to it. So back to the port we go. Now, I'd been to dozens of ports, been out to sea for years, and never had I done anything so stupid as set my wallet down or ID down, especially in a taxi. So I'm also pretty mad at myself. And I'm pretty drunk. So we get back to the port. I convinced the guard to let me scour through the log books. Man, there was a lot of numbers. Now I've been using my social security number to sign every piece of paper that the government's wanted me to sign for 4 years, but I have no idea what my social security number is right now. I don't know if it was nerves or the beer, but I can't freaking remember it. I'm looking at all these numbers, and so there's some letters in there. Pretty confusing. Pages and pages and hundreds of names, and finally there it is. That's me. Pretty sure that's my number. Next to it is the taxi cab's number. So we write it down. We head back out to my cab. My cabbie calls his dispatcher and gives him the whole story, which the dispatcher was not invested into this as much as the cabbie was, or I. And so it didn't sound too promising. Another half hour of driving around, my cabbie's phone rings. He answers it. Hello, sir. Yes, sir. No, sir. Thank you, sir. Very good, sir. This sounds good to me. He hangs up. He says, they woke up the Minister of Transportation. Holy shit. International incident. This is just some drunk sailor that lost his ID, but this isn't good. They woke him up because he's the only person that has access to the numbers of all the taxis in the country. He calls my cabbie, and he tells him to drive to the Hard Rock Cafe, and that taxi will meet you there. So, driving through the desert, there it is, like the Pyramid of Giza, the Hard Rock Cafe, and there's that taxi cab, and there's my driver. Now, I'm not sure if the Minister of Transportation told him to do this, but he ran towards me, and I ran towards him like long-lost lovers. I tried kissing him, but I was very grateful, and he was very helpful, and I gave him what money I had, which he didn't want to take, but if I had $1 million, I would have given it to him, because he was definitely saving my future life. Back in the cab, my cab, heading back to the port. I'm relieved. I know I have my ID. I haven't put anybody in danger. I haven't put myself in danger. It's going to be fine, but I know I'm going to be in trouble. A sailor late, especially in a foreign port, usually gets 30 days of what the Navy calls restriction, which is basically being grounded for a month. So I know that's what's going to happen. It's okay. We get back to the port. We go in, sign the logbook again. My cabbie signs it. Out the door we go, and there it is. My golden ticket. A short, slightly round, drunk Navy Chief Petty Officer passed out on a bench. I knew him. I don't know if he knew me. I don't care if he knew me. I woke him up. Chief Smith, it's Petty Officer Hanlon. I'm going to take care of you, Chief. I'm going to get you home. You're going to be okay. I wrap his arm over my shoulders. I drag him into my cab, throw him into the cab, back to the port, back to the pier, next to the ship. I thank my cabbie, a couple hugs, pay him as much as I could possibly give him. The guy was such a help. But now I stare up the gangway, looking at the quarterdeck, which is where we have to enter the ship, and looking at the officer of the deck, who's the man that I have to ask permission to come on board the ship. By this time, it's 2:30 at night. There's no hiding that I'm late. So I drag the chief up the gangway, over my shoulder. We get up there. I'm looking at the officer of the deck. He's looking at me. I say, "Sir, I'm so sorry I'm late, sir, but I found Chief Smith passed out on a bench, and I did the best I could to get him here on time, sir, but it was not easy." He says, "Petty Officer Hanlon, you've done your shipmate a great service. Way to go. Good job. We'll get him to bed. We'll take it from here. You should probably get some rest too." I agreed, and I said, "Thank you, sir," because my buddies and I planned on doing this all over again tomorrow.
I have a story too. And I'd like to dedicate it to Jean, who was my closest friend, yet when she was going through a tough time, I didn't understand what she was going through till I went through it myself. And I also want to dedicate this to everybody who has difficulty creating the family of their dreams. I'll tell you, there is no better way to celebrate your 40th birthday than to be in the middle of planning your wedding to the love of your life. And it was great. We got married up here, in fact. But even though my biological clock was kind of like a time bomb, we couldn't get pregnant right away because the tiny fifth-floor walk-up apartment that we lived in did not go with being 40 and pregnant. Couldn't move out of the rent-controlled apartment before I got married. So it was not until I was 41 that we moved into our suburban co-op. And by the following spring, I was pregnant. I was elated. I was telling my close friends, telling my close family. The book, What to Expect When You're Expecting, became my Bible. It was wonderful until 10 weeks later, when I went to the bathroom and there was blood on my panties. Called the doctor. She says, "Meet me at the emergency room." It was a Sunday, so it just took forever for the sonogram tech to show up, and I was just totally spaced out. It was so unreal. Hospitals are so unreal. And finally, she came in, did the one thing on my stomach, and goes back to her monitor, and she's sitting there for a while, and another man walks in behind her, looks at it, shakes his head, "No." The next thing I know, I'm in an operating room. And I cried out, "Don't take my baby." And the doctor gripped my shoulder and said, "Marsha, get a hold of yourself." And she put the mask over my face, and I fell into the darkness. And it was a darkness that would stay with me. Shortly after, we were at a dinner party, and another woman was having a similar problem. And she said to me, "Well, what did your doctor say about it?" "Oh, my doctor said these things happen." She says, "Get yourself another doctor." I did. Now it was like kind of less fun making a baby. You're keeping a calendar, you're taking temperature, and you're on a schedule. You have to do it at a particular day, whether you're in the mood or not. But we got pregnant again, and the endocrinologist was watching me very closely. 8 weeks. Does a sonogram, shakes his head no. And tells me there's this experimental program. Well, honestly, I completely blank on that second operation. No memory of it at all, because I was so focused on this hope of this experimental program. We applied for it, and we waited anxiously because I'd only had 2 miscarriages, and they were looking for people who had 3 miscarriages. But they did accept me to the program. And now I was a science experiment. There were so many tests. Oh, Bill had 1 test, and he did just fine. They took so much blood for blood tests that the doctor took it out of my groin instead of my arm. And then 1 test, I don't know, they had me spread eagle on this table with tubes going into me, with I don't know what going in my body, and machines scanning across me. I felt like I'd been taken by the aliens. But they accepted us into the program. The theory was that my immune system was attacking the fetus as a foreign body, And the solution was to infuse me with Bill's blood and reset my immune system. They told us, you have 6 months. Well, that is a lot of pressure. And as the time was going by, I was getting seriously depressed. I would see women walking by with their strollers or their pregnant bellies, and I was full of envy and I was full of heartache. I would drive to my therapist, and I remember the song River of Dreams would come on the radio, and I would just start weeping while I was driving. Bill came to one of those therapy sessions with me, and the therapist said, well, how do you feel about this? And he said, to me, I'm not worried about having a baby. I'm worried about you. And my love for him deepened by fathoms. But shortly after that, our friends Jean and Mario came home from Texas with their newly adopted baby boy, and Jean put him in my arms and said, Teo, you're still close to the angels. Tell them to send Marsha a baby. And he peed on me. And I got pregnant. Well, so the doctor's watching really close, more blood tests and hormones. But at 8 weeks, the fetus looked normal. I made it through the first trimester. And then there was the amnio. They don't do that anymore, really, thank God. So here I am again, lying out on an examination table with too many lights, too many machines, and they're going to put this enormous needle into my belly, and I just go to that nowhere place. And I stayed there. It was the worst Thanksgiving weekend of my life. We went to visit my brother and his wife and their newly adopted baby. We had watched them lose one baby after hours and lose another baby after 19 months of struggling to survive. Both babies had genetic defects. Bill and I had decided that if the amnio didn't come out right, if there were genetic problems, we were not going to go forward with this pregnancy. And I was now 43 years old, so the risks were very high. Amazingly, the test came back normal, and we were having a girl. Well, for a geriatric pregnancy, which was what they called it, things went pretty normally until 7 months in. I was commuting to the city then, going through Grand Central Station. This guy comes running across the platform and goes wham, right into me, sent me flying back. And I took a leave of absence from my job and stayed home, close to home after that. At 9 months, I was enormous. I looked like I had swallowed a watermelon. We're walking down the street in our little village, and this guy looks at me and goes, "Watch out, she's gonna blow." That night, I had a dream of my baby, and the next day, Sunday, the contractions started. Well, it took me until 11 o'clock Monday night to push my baby into the world. And the next morning, Bill's sitting on the hospital bed next to me, holding our baby in his arms, and I call her name, Jenna. And she picks up her little head and looks right at me. And that's the start of a whole other story. My daughter, Janet. back to my other role, I would now like to introduce Victor Moore. Victor is a music producer who has his first documentary show opening up next week. And we're so happy to welcome him. And Victor, what's your story?
Well, let me tell you. Hello, everyone. Good evening. So the title of this piece is Leave It to Beaver, Living in the Ghetto. So how many people are familiar with the TV show Leave It to Beaver? How many people? Most people. Kind of an innocent program for the most part. And for the most part, I kind of felt partial to Beaver, kind of feeling like I was Beaver, not because of his kind of quirky personality, but he had things that were similar, similar to me, something that I could relate to. He had a very strong and domineering father. He had a very supportive and active mother. And then there were kids who were totally oblivious to the real world, something that I could relate to. And I also had a very strong father and a very supportive and loving mother. And there were kids totally oblivious to the real world as well. So things that I could relate to. But another really particular feature that I liked about the Beavers, or the Cleavers, was that Beaver would have these incredible father-son conversations. And I felt I was looking forward to someday having a good father-son conversation with my dad. So it really kind of inspired me to watch that show. So again, my name is Victor Moore. I'm from Baltimore. Victor Moore from Baltimore. The city and I are intrinsically linked by name and perhaps reputation. Hopefully not. I come from a large family. I have 6 sisters and 4 brothers. There was a girl named Eleanor, a girl named Ruby, a girl named Marcella, another girl named Diane. Then a boy named Henry, a boy named Larry, a boy named Victor, that's me, well, a man named Victor now. Another daughter or girl named Anita came along, and then there was another boy named Maurice as well. And then finally, another girl named Tanya, but we called her Lassie because we thought she would be Lass, but she wasn't. There was another boy, a boy named Rufus. And what are all their birthdays? I have not a clue. I figured just remembering their names would be good enough. And ironically, we really never celebrated birthdays at our family household. And it wasn't until years later I kind of figured out why. The cost would be astronomical. Like, how could you afford to have birthdays for all those kids? So somehow we kind of bypassed that celebration. My mother, Vivian Moore, is the best person, or was the best person that I've ever met. An incredibly loving and spiritual person, a religious person. We were raised Catholic, and 3 of us became altar boys, my 2 older brothers and myself. I remember, one of the biggest things being an altar boy during the midnight masses that you have to, attend and not fall asleep during the service. So I remember struggling through that, And then eventually, for some reason, our family left the Catholic Church. Never asked my mother why, but then suddenly she joined and became a Jehovah's Witness. She never forced it on us, She, gave us the freedom to do whatever we liked. But it was a very odd, moment for us to suddenly go from that, worship to whatever, you felt appropriate. Also, my mother was a daycare mom. So not only did she raise these 11 kids, she would receive up to 3 kids during the day, during the week. So she was extremely busy, obviously, taking care of all these people. And my mother was kind of sought after in the daycare, community, because parents knew that if you left your kids with Mrs. Moore, they would be fed, they would be cleaned, and they would be taken care of as if they were her children. That kind of love and compassion that, that she possessed. Again, I'm from the projects of Baltimore, or I am from the projects of Baltimore. You know, the buildings that I grew up in don't exist anymore. They were humanely destroyed by dynamite. You know, there was a nickname in this city that I grew up, or this area that I grew up in. It was called Dodge City, because there were so many shootouts that happened there. In fact, my brother was shot in the leg while standing talking to a friend. It kind of ended his career. He was an athlete, he was a football player, but, you know, never went on to play college football or beyond. But don't worry, don't feel too sorry for him. He went on to graduate from the University of Southern California, USC, and he has a beautiful wife. At one point, my parents did I want to say an experiment, but they sent some of the kids to a different school district. So some of us went to schools where we were suddenly minorities, like African Americans were minorities in these particular school districts. And the end result is the kids who went to the schools outside of our district went on to higher education, whereas those who did not go on to higher education. But I'm not saying education makes them a better people. So it's not a qualitative thing, but just a glimpse at the reality of, you know, my growing up. We grew up poor. We were on welfare. You know, we would once a month go to some government facility to get, you know, the government rations, huge boxes of cornflakes and powdered milk and powdered eggs and Spam and peanut butter and jelly. You know, I'm sure there were a bunch of other things, but you tend to remember what you enjoyed. And I was a big fan of peanut butter and jelly. And then, of course, once a month, you know, we would receive the government stipend. You know, eventually, I guess it went from cash to these colorful things called food stamps, which as a kid is kind of something very cool. Looks better than real cash. It's different colors, you know, but as you grow up, you know, when you're at the counter, you realize the stigma attached to, you know, having to pay through food stamps instead of regular cash. So somehow, our family grew up relatively unscathed in this environment. I feel like if you met my family, you probably wouldn't realize a little bit of our background. And I equate that to two things. One, having parents who were there and cared for us and gave us directions. And then the other was we listened and followed those directions. In 1999, December 1999, my mother passed away on December 26th. And I felt like she did that because she wanted Jesus to have his full day uninterrupted by her. You know, very loving, you know, caring, spiritual relationship that she nurtured with him. And then some 6 months later, my father passed away. And he passed away on Father's Day. And then I could recall, you know, after I think of it now, I feel like, you know, that father-son, leave it to beaver moment that I was looking for, actually I was experiencing daily, you know, with my father. So that is my story.
Next, I'd like to welcome Eileen Riley to the stage. Eileen's from Brooklyn, as you'll hear. And but we're so happy to have her up here. She is a civic leader. She's an environmentalist. And from my point of view, she's the best hiking buddy a girl could have.
I had a magical childhood growing up in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, with the Statue of Liberty always in view in Greater New York Harbor. The best was that no matter where I was in Brooklyn, I felt comfortable and safe, always. In the late 80s, crack cocaine arrived and crime came with it. Suddenly, bars went up on windows and doors in many neighborhoods, but in the early 90s, I still felt very safe in Bay Ridge. My all-time favorite street in the Ridge had enormous sycamore trees that provided complete shade in summer and deep shadows on a summer night. This was the scene of my first experience with robbery, with a Glock put to my head on that shadowy street. I learned the hard way that I was no longer safe and would no longer walk alone at night in Bay Ridge or New York City ever again. In the winter of 1993, I splurged and bought myself a fine winter coat, my first as an adult. When I was called for jury duty in March, I traveled to Brooklyn Heights, where the courts are located, wearing my new and very warm winter coat. I ran into a friend, and we agreed to meet afterward at the Montague Saloon up the street from the courthouse. The place, because of its proximity to the courts, was frequented by attorneys, jurors, and business people. When I arrived, I was told by the manager that I could hang my coat on one of the many coat hooks in the room. I wasn't happy about that. After an hour of hanging out with my friend, it was growing dark outside, and my friend had to leave. I got ready to leave as well, but when I went to the hook where my coat had been, I discovered it was gone, stolen. I told the manager, who assured me it was a case of someone taking the wrong coat and that it would be returned. He said I should call tomorrow. On the way out, I checked every coat and every coat hook before leaving with no luck. My coat was not there. It was freezing cold outside. It was dark. I took a taxi home. I called every day that week, but my coat was not returned. That weekend, I spent Saturday afternoon with friends of mine in Manhattan. Driving back home through Brooklyn, I suggested, let's stop at the Montague Saloon and see if my coat has been returned. It was not there. The manager appeared to be annoyed with me and tired of my attempts to get my coat back. My friends and I sat at the bar, and I ordered a glass of wine. I was sitting at the end of the bar, closest to the front door, my friends to my left. When we got up to leave, I saw that my purse that had been hanging on the back of my bar stool was gone. Nowhere to be found. I immediately told the manager, who looked at me as if I was making this up. He advised that this was an upscale place and that coats or handbags were never stolen there. He said he would call the police, did so, and then he locked the front door. When the police arrived, I was asked to step outside and was then escorted to the back seat of the patrol car. My friends followed, but were not invited to sit in the police car, of course. The restaurant manager then locked the door behind us. Didn't want us back. This was all new to me, being treated like a criminal. Interrogated in the back seat of a locked patrol car. Oh my God. I was not comfortable with the questions asked, as if I were the villain and not the victim. They asked if I came to the bar often. No. Did I drink a lot? No. It was not asked if I saw anyone suspicious that I thought might have stolen my pocketbook. When the Q&A was over, I asked, innocently, if they would help me find my purse. It had everything in it: my wallet, money, credit cards, keys, checkbook, social security card, and an NYPD miniature gold detective shield that had been a present to me from a dear friend who had recently died. I hoped that maybe the thief took only the money and the credit cards and tossed my purse. No, they said, they had more important things to do and that I should go home. My friends and I began searching the area, hoping to find my discarded purse. We looked in the doorways of the shops along Montague Street and the subway station platforms below, to no avail. Alone on a back street while searching through a litter basket, in my anger, I kicked over the litter basket, trash and all. Urgh! And that felt so good. Within minutes, a policeman was behind me, telling me, they crawled out of the woodwork, telling me to pick up the litter. I refused. He kept telling me to pick up the litter, and I kept saying no. I told him my story of the stolen coat, stolen pocketbook, and the gold NYPD detective badge. No, I was not picking up the fucking trash. He grabbed my hands behind my back, pushed me to my knees, telling me to clean up the litter. Suddenly, I could hear a patrol car approach, came to a stop in front of me, and 2 policemen's shoes are now in my face, because I'm down on my knees, my head is almost in the trash, being held by the police officer. Next, I saw a new pair of shoes to the left of me, and my friend Jim. I could hear his quiet voice saying, "Officer, I will clean up the trash. Eileen, leave, now." He repeated it twice, and finally the police officer released my hands, and I stood up. I looked at all the NYPD officers that had surrounded me over spilled litter. As angry as I was, I said not a word and walked away while Jim cleaned up the litter. Next morning, I was to be at my Uncle James' birthday lunch in a town called Cold Spring, somewhere in New York. I only knew it was upstate on Route 9. I drove north, growling along the way to vent my anger. When I came to Croton and saw the Hudson River with low mountains on the other side, I began to calm down a little bit. Further north, I saw the start of what I would soon learn was the lower Hudson Highlands and the Bear Mountain Bridge. I eventually found the town of Cold Spring and drove down Main Street, seeing the gazebo and Storm King Mountain and the other mountains across the Hudson River. I thought there was a good reason for God bringing me to Cold Spring that day. I had landed in a beautiful and very different magical place. Then and there, I decided it was time to leave Brooklyn. I moved to a small cabin in Garrison 9 months later. I still love my visits to Brooklyn, but I am very happy that Putnam County is now my home.